Welcome into another edition of SEC Football and Beyond. I'm Neil McCready, Chris Landry with me here as well today. We did about 30 seconds of show prep today, which is my fault. I've got some stuff going on. So welcome into our show. Thanks for being with us. I need to move my seat. I'm trying to fix myself in the deal. The screen's kind of weird. It's all fine. You're not here to look at our faces. You're here to hear our thoughts. SEC football gets started tomorrow. Chris, on Tuesday when we came on, I think I hit you with the curveball because I don't think you knew about Hurricane Delta at the time. I told you that Hurricane Delta was out there in the Yucatan Peninsula and was threatening the weekend. And sure enough, it has impacted two games, one a lot, one a little. LSU and Missouri were scheduled to play at 8 o'clock on Saturday in Baton Rouge. Instead, they will play at 11 a.m. tomorrow in Columbia, Missouri. Ole Miss and Alabama were scheduled to kick off at 5 p.m. in Oxford tomorrow. Instead, they will kick off at 6:30 in Oxford, so not quite as big of a deal there. But sure enough, Hurricane Delta had a little impact. I think it shows you, Chris, just how much the fact that the LSU game was moved to Missouri, and the fact that the Ole Miss game wasn't moved. Ole Miss and Alabama had a mutual open date on November the 7th, where I think in a normal year, they may have moved that game. It shows you just how serious the league is about getting these games in, about saving the schedule flexibility in the event of a COVID issue. And they made that perfectly clear about picking up LSU and moving them to Columbia, Missouri, and say, hey, let's get the game in. This year is about fulfilling TV contracts. And if you needed more proof of it, you got it on that when they moved LSU, Missouri to Columbia. Yeah,
they're so good now with the Doppler radars and things to be able to tell you. Now, they can't tell you on Tuesday what it's going to be on Friday, but they have been pretty accurate. I am in Baton Rouge where obviously the LSU game was scheduled, and I can tell you it's going to hit. And by daybreak tomorrow, it will have passed through and we'll be getting out of there. But we don't know what's going to be there. Now, it's still going to be, and God bless them, it's probably going to hit Cameron Parish again. That's where Hurricane Laura, for those of you that are not as familiar with Southwest Louisiana, they're going to get hit again. So got 25,000 people that are still in hotels from Hurricane Laura. Are now going to hit with another one. You've got houses that have got those blue tarps as they're got massive destruction from Laura. Now it's going in there again. So just pray for those folks. But Baton Rouge is going to be on the east side of it. It will probably be Category 2, lots of rain, and, we don't know what it's going to look like. So in theory, I don't know. Maybe it could have been playable. You don't want to have – Missouri can't be coming in today and fine. So it made all the sense in the world, and that's what you need to do. So, and I think where this storm is headed, it's going to bring some rain potentially in some places, but by – moving the Ole Miss Alabama game, that's just the direct result of when they anticipate where some of the rain is going to be and when it's going to be heaviest. And so we adjust the times forward, backwards accordingly. So look, it is important to get them in, and you want to save a bye week if at all possible, because we're seeing this more and more. And we're definitely, those you don't know, I'm very involved in the NFL, and we're dealing with that right now. With games getting pushed back consistently now. We're going to have a Tuesday night game. We got Tuesday night football and another Monday night doubleheader in the NFL. So dealing with the COVID issue is something that's still potentially out there with the cooler weather around the country. So having those open dates available to maneuver because of that's important. So if you can skirt around the weather, and hey, I look the bright side. This is the first time you realize this is the first time ever that the LSU Tigers have played in Columbia, Missouri, ever, 127 years. So they get to do something that they've never done.
Well, that'll be exciting to go to Missouri and play a game.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've never done it.
Yeah.
Not a long history. And, but anyway, in fact, that was the first game that Ed Orgeron coaches, the interim coach, was against Missouri in Tiger Stadium.
Oh, is that right? I didn't remember that.
Yeah, when he took over after the, the loser go home bowl with Gus and Les. Remember the
Oh, yeah.
LSU scored on the last play, and then it was
Oh, yeah, for
it
sure.
was turned back, and Gus with the sweater vest is saying, "Yay!" and "Woo!" and Gus is still there, and Les, God bless him, we wish him well. Les Miles was announced that he came down with COVID, and so we wish him the best. As this is certainly an issue that we're having no laughing matter. So.
Oh, no, not a laughing matter at all. But I suspect Les will be fine. I've hit the point where you can be sympathetic and say, "Hey, good luck with your recovery," and all those things. But the odds are overwhelming that they will indeed recover.
I hope he's well, but after watching his team play, I think he should request a 3-week quarantine just because, not for COVID reasons, but for football reasons.
A football quarantine.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about some games coming up. Pretty full slate. It is a full slate in the SEC. Everybody's getting started. So we'll start with the one that we just got through talking about, the game, but not the game itself. LSU is at Missouri now. I guess they'll wear the same uniforms they were going to wear. LSU wears white at home, so they'll probably wear white on the road, which means Missouri will wear some form of a black jersey and all that stuff. So it'll look exactly like it was going to look. I'm looking for an updated line on this, Chris. There it is. It opened at 19. It is now across the board steady. LSU a 14.5-point favorite at Missouri. LSU looked pretty good against Vanderbilt. What's the, I guess, first of all, from a football standpoint, having to pick up and travel when you weren't preparing for travel, does that take anything away from LSU here?
Not as much as I think people think. I think right now we're all in an adjustment period. I do think this year is of how you have to adjust practices. Look, I mean, it would be a bigger adjustment if they had to deal with playing a home game and trying to avoid when they could practice. I mean, they couldn't do walk. I mean, there's a lot of things. I don't think it's a bigger deal. I think it's a bigger deal, with all due respect, if this game was a better opponent. I think it could have an effect. Have an effect potentially, affecting the outcome, two different things. I think this is kind of a game in which that they'll be able to handle on personnel and personnel alone. This is not a great matchup for Missouri, but yeah, a little bit of a distraction for LSU. I'm not gonna downplay it in that regard, but I don't think it's significant.
All right, give me a scenario where Missouri is competitive in this game.
Well, they're going to have to do a better job defending the run. Now, I do think that Tennessee's offensive line is run blocking better than LSU. Certainly, it's how I got them graded, and they allowed 400-plus yards of total offense, and it just didn't play very well against Tennessee. So they're going to have to play well, better. They're going to have to defend the run. That's what LSU's going to want to do. And they're going to have to get a good game out of. And I like the kid, the quarterback. I don't know if you've had a chance to really watch him play a little. Basilic is a really talented young guy, and I think they've got something. So, I think the formula is to get out to a quick start. It's never a bad thing, but I think it's essential in a game like this. And I think create some turnovers defensively, because I don't think they'll be able to stop LSU, but I think you can create some turnovers, create some short fields. I think it's going to be difficult with the young quarterback, with a lot of the rush pressure that LSU is going to bring. It's going to be very difficult, and I think the turnovers are going to be more on the opposite side with Mizzou. So I think it's a tough game. I really do for them.
Yeah, I do too. I think this is a game LSU wins handily. I actually think LSU covers that line fairly easily. I don't like this Missouri team. I've watched them a little bit, and nothing about them stands off the page. Nothing jumps at you and says this makes them fun to watch or interesting to watch or intriguing or whatnot. They're frankly kind of a boring club so far.
Yeah, Roundtree's a good back. There's just not a lot of playmakers, and it's part of the problem. We've said it before, but, Coach Drink is going to have to find a way to recruit better. and kind of raise that. That was something that Barry wasn't an ideal fit for, even though he was a Mizzou guy. And I don't know that Eli's going to be able to do it, but can he do? And I would say that there's a little bit of a parallel, not just because they're adjoining states, but, you know, he's got to do a little bit what we've seen maybe a Sam Pittman do. But, you know, we've not seen the early results from Mizzou. We'll see if it gets better as the year goes along, and we'll see what the recruiting trails bring in.
All right. South Carolina is not right. Yeah, it is. South Carolina's at Vanderbilt. This line opened at 11. This is a 11 a.m. game also. This game will be on SEC Network. By the way, the LSU-Missouri game will be on the SEC Network alternate channel, is my understanding. I was originally scheduled ESPN, but ESPN had to adjust on the fly like we all did. So this started at 11 points, South Carolina, an 11-point favorite at Vanderbilt. It has moved to 13.5 across the board, 13.5. South Carolina giving almost 2 touchdowns to Vanderbilt on the road, Chris.
Yeah, you know, in the loss to Florida and the vitriol that is following Will Muschamp, and listen, I get it, he's been there a while, and you don't see maybe a lot of progress if you're a South Carolina fan. The things that the film shows, that when you're a little bit more objective and calm and looking at it, is, you know, they defended the run pretty well against Florida, and they ran the football pretty well early until they had to abandon it. And that's what you have to do against Florida's offense when you get behind. They'll be able to control this game. This is a not a statement game, but a game in which you have to make a statement. What's the difference? Well, in my mind, this is a team that you need to kind of hammer. You need to play well. You need to show, hey, look, you know, kind of we grow from it. And we know it's really more to do with who the opponents are. But I think that's the real key, is in this game, you've got to be able to figure out a way to get the offense humming, run the football, control this game at the line of scrimmage. I think that's going to be key, and I think they win this game going away.
I do too, and I'll tell you this: if they don't, you know, it's funny. We talk about in a COVID year, no coach is really on the hot seat, blah blah blah. It's always interesting, even in a COVID year, even when the money's not there, when the emotions start running high during a season, you do start to wonder, what if? And I think Will Muschamp is approaching that what if range. You know, I mean, I did this all last year, Chris, with Matt Luke. We're all year, I would ask week after week after week to people who are in control, is there a scenario where Matt Luke's in trouble? And the answer was always no, there's really not. And then as the losses piled up, that began to change. Will Muschamp can't afford to lose a game like Saturday. He can't go to Vanderbilt and lose knowing what's coming. All of a sudden, people go from we can't afford it to we can't afford not to.
Yeah, I don't think losing this is going to be an issue. I do think that an ugly win, and I don't really believe in ugly wins, but from a fan and media standpoint, a win in which you don't dominate a Vanderbilt and you show that, hey, you're just a little bit better than them and win, I think might fall into the category not as bad as a loss, but man, this is just piling up. And then because you know there are going to be losses coming up on the schedule, and if you not able to handle it, if they have a game like A&M had against Vanderbilt, it's going to be another, you know, hey, look at this. Look, let's call it what it is. Will is going to be replaced. It's not if, it's when. And it's just going to be a matter of, it's, as you say, it's whether they feel like they can come up with the money now and whether they want to do it, or whether the apathy is so great that they can't not afford to do it. I think it may involve some other issues. You've got a president there at that school that has kind of been involved in West Point, and he kind of takes credit for, you know, reviving that program with his coaching hire there, Coach Munkin. And he's kind of had some goofy comments at the end of last year, but I think he is poised to try to make a move on Ray Tanner, maybe. And, you know, obviously the head coaching position at some point. If it's this year, don't know. But I don't know that unless the complete collapse, and this would classify that, but I think it's even still early. But I think Will is definitely on on the watch list was at the beginning of the year, and I have a hard time seeing how he survives, and only would survive this year in a COVID year.
All right, Florida. This is an interesting game. One that I really want to get your thoughts on. Florida at Texas A&M. It's an 11 a.m. Central game. You can see it on ESPN. The Gators opened as a 6-point favorite. And this line, depending on where you are, whether you're at Bovada where it's 7, or if you're at Bet Online, it's 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7. This line's 6.5 to 7 points, so the line has jumped just a little bit. Florida, a 6.5-point favorite seems to be the consensus at Texas A&M. If you had told me before the season started that the line on this game, Chris, was 6.5, I would have guessed that Texas A&M was a 6.5-point favorite.
Ooh. Really? Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do this. We in the media do this every single year. We hype Texas A&M. This is the year that Texas A&M becomes a contender. No, this is the year that Texas A&M becomes a contender. No, this is absolutely the year that Texas A&M emerges as an elite SEC player. It hasn't happened. They're 1-1. They did not look good against Vanderbilt. They got thumped by Alabama. Proving that they're nowhere close to the Crimson Tide. And here we are against Florida, a Florida team that has looked good, a Florida offense that has been dynamic. Florida 2-0, they've beaten Ole Miss, they've beaten South Carolina, and here they go into College Station for a 11 o'clock kick. You're higher on the Aggies than I am. Do you think Texas A&M has a chance to win this game?
No, I'm not high on them. I'm just more realistic. Like, for example, I certainly didn't see it that way. I see Florida as a 12 to 14-point better team on talent. But in August now, I mean, they're just that much better. They have more playmakers. They have more talent. I don't get into the hype of. I mean, A&M is what it is. I think the biggest problem with A&M is that they have been overhyped. The expectations are too high. When I say too high, I'm not saying you shouldn't aspire to be better, but because you want to be doesn't mean you are. A&M's not there. I guess where I am on A&M is I have a little bit more of a feeling of, look, it's going to take time, and I realize there's no patience and all that, and I don't like the progress I'm seeing on the field this year, but I don't think they're anywhere close to Alabama or Georgia or Florida. I don't think they are. I mean, I think Florida, talent-wise, should win this game on the road by 14, 17 points. I really do. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, but that's how I see it personally. I just think Florida's that much better.
Yeah. See, I think where you and I are a little different is I think you think Texas A&M has a better chance of getting to that place down the road than I do.
Yeah, I do. You can get there. But you know what? Just because you can doesn't mean you will.
Yes.
Texas and Oklahoma could be what Clemson is. They're not, and they may never get there. But that's because they don't have the right people in place. Yeah. A&M could be there. Now, they've never been there. No, they haven't. But they've never been in the SEC with the facilities. They have the ability to. Now, is Jimbo going to be able to do it or not? That's going to be up to Jimbo. I think there's still a chance that it's going to be better. I don't know that A&M. I think what it is, Neil, is when you pay somebody that amount of money, they think, and he's a Nick Saban disciple, that he's going to do what Nick Saban does. A&M's not Alabama. B, Jimbo's not Nick. So that's not going to happen. So when you take that off the table, I see it a little bit more realistically that I could see A&M being a really good program where it's, outside of Alabama, they could do what Auburn and LSU's done. And I'm not talking about LSU last year, but kind of in that range. That's where I see A&M potentially. Now, is Jimbo going to be able to do it? I think he can. And I do think he will, but I don't know that. Obviously, I don't. There's no way to know that for certain.
Yeah, it's the fun part of doing a show like this is one of us will be right, one of us will be wrong. I don't think he can, and I don't think he will. And that's me. I know that there's a lot of money there and there's a lot of stuff. There's also a lot of weirdness there. It's a different kind of place, and I don't know that it's for everybody. And I don't know that they can. I don't know that they can recruit at the same level as a lot of teams in the SEC. Not just that upper crust elite, but a lot of teams. I think there are some issues there that create that. The CBS game, and probably if you were to really pin people down, the most potentially intriguing game of the day. Tennessee is at Georgia. It's a 3:30 Eastern kick, 2:30 Central on CBS. This line, Chris, opened at minus 14.5. The Bulldogs a 14.5 point favorite. It has dropped across the board to 12.5. So Georgia a 12.5 point favorite. Both teams unbeaten so far, 2-0 in the season. Georgia has wins over Arkansas and Auburn. Tennessee has wins over South Carolina and Missouri. The Vols getting 12.5 going into Georgia. This obviously is a measuring stick sort of game, I think, for Jeremy Pruitt and Tennessee. Even if it doesn't win, an opportunity to say, hey, we're more in this, we're closer to this than we've been in the past. We're a program on the rise, and an opportunity for Georgia to get to 3-0 before they head to Alabama next week for the showdown that I think everybody's waiting on.
Yeah, I do think it matters how it looks, particularly for upcoming programs. We just talked about A&M. A&M doesn't look good against Vanderbilt. They didn't look good in getting dominated by Alabama. Well, Tennessee, and if you take, the schedule, that A&M would probably be unbeaten, but they haven't looked as good. Tennessee's look good. They look good against Missouri. They've done what they needed to do, and they did, I thought, a really good job at the line of scrimmage the first 2 weeks. And I think South Carolina is a game that a team you could look at and say, well, wait a minute, that's a program that's been there a while. Well, you can look at it and say, Jeremy Pruitt, look at him. And look at where he's got them versus Will at this stage of South Carolina.
Yeah.
And so you've got now Auburn getting hammered by Georgia. If Tennessee can go in, play Georgia competitively, get this into the second half and into the fourth quarter, and I think Georgia will win, but it's competitive. And it doesn't look like, oh, you're just a complete beatdown like Auburn looked against Georgia. Like it looked like, it was a completely different. If Tennessee can show that, then no one will say it publicly, but a lot of fan base will be realistic enough to say, hey, you know what? Yeah. We're not there yet, but we're making progress. Yeah. So it does matter how it looks. And I do think they match up better at the line of scrimmage, Neil. They have an offensive line that's better, significantly better than Auburn's. They're going to get challenged big time by an outstanding defensive front of Georgia that can bring it. So how well it looks in the games within the games with that aforementioned offensive line. What can Garantano do against this defense that plays tight coverage and plays good defense on all three levels? And then defensively, I think that Tennessee might be able to hold on a little bit against this Georgia offense. But by the same token, we're looking at Georgia differently. There's a higher expectation. Georgia's a dominant defense. They ran the football better last week. Can the passing game continue to progress? And that's so. I think it's, to me, anything can happen. I would be very surprised if there was an upset here. I think it's only margin of victory, and I do think how it looks is important for Georgia and Tennessee because different programs are at different levels, and I see Tennessee, quite a bit behind Georgia. But I will say this to wrap it up: Jeremy wants to build a team kind of in the same image of what Kirby does, physical at the end. And there's a little bit of bad blood there for Cade Mays and some other situations, but they're not exactly sending Christmas cards to one another. Jeremy and Kirby, that is. But there's a lot of wanting to build that program the same way because they're both defensive guys, great offensive line, build a great defense, and you want to have a quarterback that protects the football. That's the formula. And so I think they're looking over at the program that they'd like to be in addition to the program right now they'd eventually like to beat.
Yo, I agree. So what do you think about this line, 12.5? Because I've gone back and forth on this. There's a part of me that thinks Georgia covers that, and there's a part of me that thinks Tennessee's ready to play Georgia within 10 points or so.
I think you're going to, through the first half and into the third quarter, you're going to say, oh, this is going to be close. I think Georgia's going to end up covering that by the time the game's over. I think what it is with Georgia, they're a different type of team that, no, they're the anomaly now. It takes 4 quarters to impose their will on you. Now, they imposed their will on Auburn early, and so it looked and felt like a blowout early. This won't look and feel like a blowout. In fact, it won't be one until the very end. And I think the fourth quarter, that's where the might will kind of show up. It's the way I see it. Look, I look at it as Georgia plays their game. They're going to win and going to win decisively. I think Georgia's the key factor here. They're determined. I don't think Tennessee can win. I think Georgia would have to help the cause. I think Georgia wins. I think they win in a 4-quarter game. And I think in the end, it's probably 14, 17 points in that range.
Okay, interesting. All right, here's a line, Chris, that has really surprised me this week. Arkansas, winners of 1 game in a row in the SEC. I think when you lose 20 in a row, you get to claim one as a winner.
Yeah, 1 in a row. I was about to say, I like how you phrase that.
Arkansas with the 1-game winning streak. They hit the road at Auburn. This game is a 3 p.m. game on the SEC network. This line, Chris, opened at -16, Auburn -16. It has shifted to either 13 or 13.5. The smarts, if you will, don't like the Tigers after that performance last week in Athens. Arkansas now getting 13.5 at Auburn. A lot of commonality here. Chad Morris, the former Arkansas coach, is now the offensive coordinator at Auburn. Barry Odom's been in the league as a head coach at Missouri. He's now at the defensive coordinator at Arkansas, so he knows Malzahn. He's coached against him a lot here. I'm surprised, Chris, frankly, that this line is as low as it is. 13.5 looks low to me. If you had told me in August that, hey, Neil, the line on the Arkansas-Auburn game will just be 13.5, I would have thought, no way. What happened? Did Nix get hurt? Did something happen? But tell me why the line's this low.
Well, the line's this low because people react to what they saw most recently. So what do they see? Auburn getting manhandled by Georgia. And in their eyes, they see Arkansas beating Mississippi State, who, beat LSU, the defending champions. And again, styles make fights. So people just kind of assume that Arkansas is really that much better. They're not.
Well, this is Vegas, though, Chris. This isn't a bunch of.
Yeah, well, but remember though, Vegas makes a line based upon not who's better by how many points.
They're trying to get money on each side.
Yeah. So this is what the fans think, and I think it's moved because of that.
Okay,
that's why I mean, personally, you said it started at 16-ish. I'm not a line guy, but 16-ish is about right to me. But it's gone down to, like you said, 3-4 points. Why? Because I'm definitely taking Arkansas. Arkansas looks good. Auburn's better. I don't know that they're a lot. I don't think Auburn. I think Auburn's got some issues as it relates to upper tier teams. I don't think Arkansas is there. There's kind of a caste system yet, and I do think it's positive. I think this is where Auburn gets well, and this is kind of where Gus and kind of survives, right? I mean, they look awful and they respond. They always play well against Arkansas. Arkansas has been really bad, though. This is a different Arkansas. I get it. I don't know if Auburn's going to win by 14 or 17 or 21. And I know, well, that's what we want to know. Well, I think Auburn's going to win. And I think we saw them against Kentucky struggle. Kentucky's better than Arkansas. And Auburn struggled with them. I think Auburn's going to be able to pull away in this game. I really do. I think that Bo Nix is going to have a good game. I think that they're going to have more time, to be able to throw. Listen, don't get fooled by – it's not that Arkansas is better than Mississippi State. Mississippi State has more talent than Arkansas. It was styles make fights. and we went over that on Tuesday, that Mississippi State just poorly coached in terms of how you match up. I don't think we're going to see that. I think Chad's going to have success throwing the football on Arkansas in a different way. I think, although they haven't played well on the offensive line, I think you'll see Auburn's offensive line play a little bit better this week. So, look, I think Auburn's going to win. I don't know by how many points. It may be, 13 points, 10 points. I think it's probably more towards 17-ish. So that's kind of how I see it. But I mean, does that make sense? I mean, I think that people see it as about a 17-point game. I do, and then I can see fans reacting because fans are not looking at tape. They're not seeing matchups. They're seeing, well, wait a minute, Arkansas beat Mississippi State, who beat LSU. Auburn, got lucky to beat Kentucky and got hammered by Georgia. Well, I'm betting Arkansas because I think they'll keep it close, maybe even win. A lot of people think Arkansas is going to win, because they're reacting to that. And who knows? We'll be coming here Tuesday talking about an Arkansas win. I don't see it. I think Auburn doesn't solve problems this week. I just think that they're better in terms of where they are.
Yeah, so my take on Arkansas is this, and I've watched them a couple of times. One, they just happen to be on. Two, I have a daughter that goes to school there, and so we keep up with it. Gives us something to joke around about. My take on Arkansas is this: they're better coached this year than they were in the past couple of years. There's no question that the kids are playing with a little more belief. They're playing harder. All those kind of intangible things. Offensively, Franks gives them a little stability at the quarterback spot that they didn't have before, but they're still fairly anemic on that end of the field. Defensively, you can tell that they're well coached. They get in the right spots. They're probably not athletic enough to do a lot of the things that Barry Odom would like to do, but they're steady over there. Not good, but steady and well coached, have a good plan, etc. I think this is a 17-point Auburn win. I think Auburn has some flaws. They've been exposed a little bit, but I still think Auburn's a really good team, and I just don't think Arkansas is ready to compete at this level. I don't. I think Arkansas is going to lose a bunch of games. Like Ole Miss goes to Arkansas next week, and when I look at that game in my mind's eye, I see an Ole Miss win, and I see a fairly convincing Ole Miss win because I think Ole Miss is going to score a lot of points against that defense. But we'll talk about that next week. But I don't know. Arkansas is better than they were. If I'm an Arkansas fan, I'm certainly encouraged by what I've seen in the first two with the way that the Hogs played against Georgia, and obviously the way that they went to Mississippi State, had a great plan, executed that plan, and won an emotional game. And I do think when you get a win after losing 20 in a row, it gets easier to win. It's easier to win the second time than it is the first time, always. So it's interesting, but I think Auburn covers this line.
Hey, real quick, I'll throw out some notes because I do this, and this is some of the details in the film room breakdowns over at Landry Football. Cheap plug, but I go into a lot of the football part, but I do have some information that is gathered on some trends that people like, betting trends. Okay, so Arkansas is 4-0 against the spread in the last 4 games. Now, that's including last year, so doesn't really matter. They're 4-0 in the last 4 games as an underdog, and 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 conference games. Auburn is 2-5 against the spread in their last 7 games after accumulating less than 100 yards in the previous game. So that is the vote for Arkansas in terms of betting trends. The Football Eye says it's going to be a win and a potentially significant win. And I think it's going to come down to quarterback play because neither one of these teams are running the football very well. I think Bo Nix is going to play well. I think you're going to see Seth Williams get some matchups, and that's going to be the difference. And again, people say, well, the difference is Arkansas is going to have a harder time dealing with this type of offense than they did in playing the soft cone against Mike Leach. And I know most people don't get that. Oh, wait a minute. I thought, Leach, it's a different style, and I think you're going to see Auburn have more success. I agree with you.
We'll get to the other games in just a minute. I want to first tell you that this podcast is brought to you by Jupiter Security Systems based in Madison, Mississippi. Jupiter Security Systems provides your business with a help desk allowing you to get software at a much cheaper price than you would pay going directly to Microsoft or the different cybersecurity services. Jupiter Security Systems offers businesses the full Microsoft 365 suite, email spam protection. They monitor their workstations and servers as well. Jupiter doesn't see your data, by the way, but they'll know if malicious applications get installed on your computers. They can set up remote monitoring on a computer regardless of the location. So don't spend money on getting your employees new laptops to work remotely. Instead, let Jupiter monitor their home computers and protect your data wherever you choose to work. Jupiter Security Systems offer cybersecurity and monitoring. It is ADT for your computer systems and data, and it's very affordable with a flat price and no hidden add-ons. For more information, call Eric at 601-519-9583 or email info at jupitersecurity.net, or you can visit jupitersecurity.net. We're also brought to you by Blue Sky. Blue Sky believes in being fast, fresh, and friendly. Throughout the thoughtful layout and cleanliness of their stores, Blue Sky hopes to provide customers with a fast and easy buying experience. From services to products, Blue Sky plans to keep things fresh and always provide the freshest flavors of their brand name products and the best services available. They even bring in some of the newest products on the market to their stores to provide an even better customer experience. A smile can say it all. Blue Sky wants to show their customers that they care about them and their shopping experience. They'll always strive to improve their efforts to accomplish exactly that. So check out Blue Sky today at any of their 48 store locations across the Southeast. All right, Chris, let's see what we got here. Get back to my sheet. There we go. Get into this evening portion of the SEC, which is a little lighter than it was going to be originally. Ole Miss and Alabama. Game was originally scheduled to kick at 5. They'll kick at 6:30 at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, about 8 minutes from where I am right now. This opened as a 24-point line. It has pretty much held there. It's now 23.5. It's moved down a half a point across the board. Alabama, a 23.5-point favorite at Ole Miss. Here's my question, Chris. We'll start with this one. If the weather forecast is right, and again, we're still 30 some odd hours out. If the weather forecast is right, it's going to be pretty wet here, and there's going to be some wind. Weather will be a factor. Does that help one team or the other?
Well, I think if you have a really sloppy track, it can neutralize some of the speed. And I do think in general, look, if you put two teams, and I would consider this a kind of a lopsided personnel,
for sure,
one versus the other. You put them on a field that's a normal field, good field. It's a decisive. So if you put it on a bad field, well, what you might do is the ability to cut, the ability to maybe be as explosive, to be as dominant. Maybe there's not as many points, and so the game might be a little bit more competitive for longer, and the game might be in doubt. And so I do think in general a really overly bad day, like excessive rain, excessive footing problems, definitely win. Those things would take the underdog and maybe give them a better chance, because even though it affects both teams, you have a little bit better chance of making a little bit more of a neutral type game. In terms of the style, it puts a little bit more emphasis on the running game. But if it's windy, if it's not windy, Neil, I really believe that it's a good time to throw. If it's a wet field and it's a cutting problem, that's when you really want to throw, because the toughest guys that have to change direction are the defenders. So I think you want to be able to throw it. And now, wet ball and being able to throw it accurately, those are some issues there. But if it's not overly windy, I think you can throw it, because I think you've got a greater chance of a defender, misstepping or just losing his footing and a guy runs free. I like to play a little bit more zone in really, really wet weather, but you still got to play man principles in zone. So it's a long way of saying, yeah, if it's really bad inclement weather, it helps Ole Miss to a point. I still think this is a game that just doesn't match up because they can't defend the run. They're really undersized. They really they can't get off blocks, and this is an offensive line that's as good as any in the country, and Alabama will have their way, and I think they'll be able to have some explosive plays off of it, and I think Ole Miss will get some, points and plays, but I just not going to be enough to match Alabama.
Yeah, it's why I picked Alabama to cover this line. It's I know there's a couple the weather, and then Alabama's got a game at Georgia next week. So once the game is in hand, Nick has to at least start thinking about, hey, getting guys off the field, preserving everybody for next week, because Georgia is capable of beating Alabama. Ole Miss isn't. So from a line standpoint, I could see a backdoor cover, some things like that. Ole Miss offensively has been terrific, and I think they'll score some points on Alabama. I think they're going to score points on everybody. But defensively, Ole Miss can't stop the run. Ole Miss hasn't proven that it can stop the pass. It can't get to the quarterback with any degree of consistency. They don't tackle well so far. That's a lot going against a team like Alabama. It might not hurt them against a team like Arkansas next week, against South Carolina later, against some of those kinds of games, Vanderbilt. There's still some – I think there's several – I think suddenly some of the games before the season that I didn't think were winnable for Ole Miss, Auburn, Texas A&M. I still think Ole Miss is an underdog in those games, but not as prohibitive as an underdog as I thought they would have been. This is not the case. Alabama, to me, is the best team in the league. I don't think it's particularly close. Jones has played terrific. Waddle's been great. Smith is a weapon. They can run the football. They're very good up front, like you mentioned. I don't know that this is the dominant Alabama defense that they've had in the past, but it's plenty good. And they're athletes all over the place. So I think Alabama's the class of the league, and I think Alabama wins easily / handily on Saturday. From a betting standpoint, the line's probably about right, and it just kind of comes down to how long Alabama stays engaged in this one, and I don't know the answer to that.
Well, and it does matter from a weather standpoint. If you're talking about the line, it could affect, some of that in terms of the margin of victory. But I think it'll be it'll be a bloodletting over 4 quarters, and I think it'll gradually, may not look like it for a while, but I think they'll win, and I think it'll be along those lines where the line is, a little bit above that.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think about 28 points. All right, this is an interesting game, Chris. It really is. I'm interested in strategy matchups here. It's an important game for both teams from a record standpoint. Mississippi State, off that loss to Arkansas in Starkville, they hit the road. They go to Kentucky. This game kicks at 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central on SEC Network. The line opened at Kentucky -2.5. And it is basically held there. It is -2 just about everywhere. A couple places it's dropped to 1.5. But Kentucky, we'll call it a 2-point favorite over Mississippi State. Here's my question. Kentucky, as Lane Kiffin and some other coaches have said, I've listened to on the SEC coaches teleconference, that kind of thing, likes to play 3 deep. They cover 3. That's their coverage. That's what they do. That's who they are. Against Mississippi State, against a Mike Leach offense, it's my understanding that you need to switch it up. You don't want to give them one look. They can pick one look apart. Strategically, if you're Kentucky defensively getting ready to face Mississippi State, what do you try to do?
Well, cover 3 obviously really prevents you from getting beat on the deep ball, but you can play it a little bit different where what you've got to do is the key is underneath. How you defend the crossers. I think you got to zone up. I think you got to get some zone drops, and you've got to play well and tackle well in space. And I think Kentucky will do that very well. Mississippi State's not going to attack you deep. They'll attack you, horizontally. And, so I think that what you have to do, now all you have to do in a lot of the cover 3, basically it's just a matter of playing your outside defenders just a little bit at the snap, a little bit shallower, and you got really a cover 1 look, and which kind of goes into can drop into a cover 3. So I think they're matched up pretty well and are positioned pretty well. But I will say this: they've given up 7 touchdowns thus far, and given up 280, almost 280 yards passing thus far. So I think Mississippi, and again, look, people, this is where stats are for losers in this regard, in that Mississippi State leads the country in yards per game. And they're going to do that. They're going to always do that because they're going to throw a lot of cheap yards. What you've got to do is, it's not so much worrying about what's behind you, but coming up, tackling in front of you, so that they don't eat up a lot of yards to where they can make a lot of plays after the catch, run after catch, because that's where they eat you up. That's where they ate up LSU. They had 385 yards and 3 touchdowns after the catch against LSU. After the catch. That was part of their almost 700 yards passing. No, I think Kentucky defensively will play it pretty well, even though they've struggled in pass coverage. I think they will be schematically prepared pretty well. I think the key is going to be is you can hold them down, Neil, but if you don't score points, if you can't run the football, that's going to be a problem. So this game will be decided because this Mississippi State defense has some talent. If Kentucky can't score points, they're in trouble, because you can stop them and stop them and stop them. But if you don't capitalize, Mississippi State will score some points. They'll end up scoring 27. They'll end up scoring 24, even if you play good defense. Can you score 30? That's the key. I think they're desperate for a win. I think that I just don't see this team going 0-3. I think Kentucky gets it done, but
I do too. That was my question. Mark Stoops was visibly agitated at the end of the Ole Miss game. Got upset at officials. I think a lot of that was anger at his own team. He was mad, presumably about that about the pass interference call in overtime.
Mm-hmm.
That was an easy call. It was right there. It was anybody could have called that. It was obvious. He was probably more frustrated with his own team for not being able to. If you tell a coach before a game you're going to run for 408 yards today, you're going to rush for 408 yards today. A coach goes, "Hey, where's the post-game celebration? We're winning." When you do that and you don't win, it's a very frustrating thing. I think he's frustrated. I suspect his team is frustrated.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I think Kentucky comes out and wins this. And I think they win it fairly handily, but there are some strategy things that are interesting. And it's a big moment for Mike Leach now, because Mike Leach has given Mississippi State fans the full Mike Leach experience in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
He took a team down to Baton Rouge and won, and then comes back for his home opener and plays what has been the worst team in the West the past few years and gets beat. That is the Mike Leach experience, and that's not what Mississippi State fans want. They want consistency. They got it for a decade with Dan Mullen, and that's what they want. And I don't know how long they ride a roller coaster before they start going, "Hey, my stomach hurts. I don't feel so good," and you know that they're on the roller coaster right now. This is a chance for him to steady things a little bit. This league, they still got to play Alabama. They still got to play Auburn. They still got to play a lot of people. If you're going to get it done at Mississippi State, you're beating the Arkansas and Kentuckys of the world. I'm just telling you. And so it's an interesting game. My TV obviously will be on Alabama and Ole Miss. That's the game I'm covering. That's the game I talk about. But I'll have the computer on State and Kentucky because I'm interested to see what it looks like.
Yeah, I actually think this is the most intriguing game of the weekend, and in that time slot, we've got Miami, Clemson, Alabama, Ole Miss, and I've got Monitor 3 will be Mississippi State, Kentucky for me, and but when you look at the other games, this is the game that has a chance to be most intriguing because Alabama, Ole Miss, Miami, Clemson, Florida State, Notre Dame. I don't think these games are going to be real close. I'm going to watch them and enjoy it, but I think in terms of intrigue, I think this is going to be the fun game. Like I didn't expect it was on Monitor 3, the Mississippi State Arkansas game, and I flipped that to 1, as ended up that being the better game. Not going in, but coming out, it was.
tell you a game that's kind of disappointing in terms of I think we thought going in this would be a battle of undefeated teams. It's not. Texas and Oklahoma, they meet in Dallas. It's a Texas favored by 2. Oklahoma already has 2 losses. They lost at Iowa State. I give myself some credit for that one. I sort of saw that one coming. And here we are, OU 1-2 with Texas coming into Dallas to play in what's usually the big. It's going to almost be a sad game. I don't know what the attendance is allowed to be, but this is such a cool game, where half the stadium is red and half the stadium is orange, and the state fair is going on underneath, and it's kind of neat. And now there's no state fair and limited fans, and the 2 teams aren't off to good starts, and it's kind of 2020 in a freaking nutshell is what it is, Chris.
May take 50 to win it. And, Texas is awful on defense. They've got Sam Ehlinger. Oklahoma is awful on defense.
Yes.
They've got a really good young quarterback, but their offense is not supersonic good. So the offensive line has struggled. Creed Humphrey has played well, center, but they've not gotten good play up front. And so it really started to affect them. Kansas State got good pressure. Hubert and those guys came off the edge, and you saw it again against Iowa State. So the issue, like with Oklahoma, is that they've been able to overcome it with their offense, been able to kind of win games. Now it's still their strength, but their strength is not as good as it has been, and the defense is, well, it's just every bit as bad as it has been. In fact, even worse. You've got a really talented young quarterback that can fling it, and I think it's going to be really good. And you've got a great competitive Sam Ehlinger that, usually finds ways to bail his team out. So you can really make a case, because in terms of importance, this game has dropped, because right now, they're all going to need some help to get back in the Big 12 race. Particularly Oklahoma, who's down 0-2. And imagine going 0-3. Let me say it, 0-3. And this is not on the young quarterback at Oklahoma, but do you realize in the history of Oklahoma football, no starting quarterback in the history of Oklahoma has ever been 0-2 in the Big 8/Big 12, ever. Now, again, it's not because of Spencer Rattler, but regardless of the reason, just really weird. It just goes to show you how dominant they've been over the years in the relative conferences. So they could go 0-3, or Texas drops their second game, and it's really bad. But in terms of just, if you're watching games, if you just like the go up and down the field, this ought to be a lot of fun. Ought to be a lot of points. It won't be over, because you can wipe out a 17-point lead like nothing in these games. I mean, it's just going to be real interesting in terms of the style, but it's not going to be much defense. It's going to be the offense, and the only way the offenses get stopped is if they stop themselves.
Any quick thoughts on Virginia Tech, North Carolina?
Yeah, I do. I really, North Carolina's got to get a little bit better on defense. They've kind of not played like I think they need to play. Virginia Tech is playing better. They've had a lot of guys out sitting to COVID. Carolina's at home, got a little bit more explosive playmakers, but to me, this is the most intriguing game of the early slate of kind of where this might go. So North Carolina a little bit at home, like their playmakers a little bit more, give them a little bit of an edge, but this is one it could go really either way.
You had to be super impressed with my Bears last night, right? I mean,
by the way, yes, I did actually, believe it or not. I did not, as long as I've known you, we've never had the conversation about your affinity with Chicago sports. I didn't know. You told me in one of our first podcasts that you're big Bears fans, Cup fan, and all that.
Yeah.
And so last night, as I'm watching it, I actually thought of you, because we're doing a podcast, and I'm thinking, boy, O'Neal ought to be happy. In fact, I'm glad you brought it up, because I need to bring it up tomorrow, and I just not the game didn't forget my mind, but it forget my mind to bring it up. Very impressed, and I have
4-1. I don't care how you get there.
You just get it. You just get them and you lock them in and move on. No, that's right. It's this is one of those. Look at the scorecard and put in the par. It doesn't matter that you hit it in the woods behind a tree and hit a recovery and made a long putt or chipped it in. A 4 is a 4 is a 4. Same as the guy that hit it 3 feet from the hole and missed the birdie putt. It just right now they're scrambling, but you know what? They're playing good situational ball, and they were able to play good enough defensively, and give them a lot of credit. Nick Foles is a good relief pitcher. It's like, can he play long relief all year is what you want to do. So, look, you got to bank those wins, and they're gonna need them, and they're right in there. And it on film it doesn't look overly impressive. But it doesn't matter. Get wins, and they'll take a few more of those. I can tell you that.
Chris, if the Bears were a restaurant, they would be telling the patrons as they leave, "Hey, you're not hungry anymore, right? You got fed, right?"
That's right.
It wouldn't.
That's right. Yeah.
Visit me,
right.
But
that's right. At least we're open, right?
Yeah. Didn't you?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm looking at the week that is coming up in the NFL. Atlanta, a 1-point favorite. Their change is coming there. Cincinnati, Baltimore, not a lot of great games. Giants and Dallas, normally a great game. No one's watching that. Indianapolis and Cleveland should be interesting.
That's the really intriguing game. Both Cleveland and Indianapolis playing pretty well. Indianapolis is starting to play better. Their protection's been really good. See what Phillip Rivers can do in this game. And Cleveland, I thought played pretty well last week. That to me is a really intriguing game. An awful two teams that are on film right now, but that NFC East is just a disaster. But the Giants and Dallas. And then I think it's really interesting, folks. Again, let's remind you, if you haven't followed it, is we're going to have a doubleheader again on Monday. So 5 o'clock Central. The Patriots are going to be playing their game.
Yeah, against Denver.
Denver.
That game has no betting line right now, so that tells you that Vegas just has no real idea what the situation is.
Correct. Which is, and then you got the Tuesday night game, Buffalo, Tennessee. So you got Buffalo, Tennessee, which precipitated the move of the Thursday night Buffalo game next week onto Sunday. So look, we knew this was going to happen. Well, we knew there's a possibility of it happening. But what's interesting is you're going to get a Monday night. You're going to get Sunday night football. You're going to get a doubleheader Monday night. You come home from work, there's Monday night football, go right up into the true doubleheader, and then you'll have Tuesday night football. Which, by the way, I don't know if you've heard that when the MAC starts, they're going to be doing pretty much all their games. They'll be doing most of their games on like the Tuesday and Wednesday night. So when that happens, you'll get all the football you want. Well, Sunday and Saturday and Sunday and Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday football. You already have Thursday football and Friday football on, so it'll be 7 days a week.
It's a dream come true for you. Yeah, there's a game tonight, Georgia Tech and somebody tonight.
Louisville. It's actually a pretty good game, ACC game that we'll see. We'll see if Georgia Tech can get back on track. Louisville's starting to play a little bit better.
That's the one thing we didn't have sports for a long time, and now we have all the sports we could want. NBA Finals tonight, Major League Baseball playoff game tonight, the Rays and Yankees a deciding Game 5. So there's plenty of sports for whatever your fancy is, and we'll be back on Tuesday. We'll look back at Week 3, and we'll start looking ahead to what should be the regular season game of the year to this point. That's Georgia at Alabama next Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. So we'll come back and we'll talk about what happened in all of these games in Columbia and Oxford and College Station and Auburn and Lexington and across the board, and get you ready for Week 4 in the Southeastern Conference. So for Chris Landry, I'm Neil McCready. Have a great weekend. Stay safe out there. And if you're in South Louisiana, you're certainly in our thoughts. We hope that you hold steady through Hurricane Delta, and that you're with us on Tuesday when we resume again. So until then, for Chris, I'm Neil. Take care.